think there are ways to ensure success, but it is something where like things happen when you're live. Like things happen. And so it's something where people join live events for that, right? For that energy, for that synchronicity. And sometimes it can be unexpected. And that's part of what makes events events. So I think that you have to just fully embrace it, right?
Hello and welcome to People in Podcasting, a show about the people who make podcasts happen at every stage of their journey. Each week, we speak to someone in the field of podcasting or digital content, going beyond their CV to see how their experiences shaped who they are today and where they're heading next. Podcasting is a fresh, evolving industry full of incredible people from all walks of life. It's a world where if you've got the skills, you can make it happen. No degree or decades of experience required. It's exciting, democratic, and inclusive. And that's what we're here to celebrate, people in podcasting. And each week, we'll be bringing in a guest to hear their stories, get their advice, and maybe offer a little of our own. Joining us today is...
Hello, my name is Sam Datter. I am an executive producer at Lower Street. I've been in podcasting for about 6 years now, and in broadcasting for close to 20. And that's me.
And I'm Daria Lawson. I'm a junior producer here at Lower Street, and I have a background in journalism and radio.
And occasionally throughout the episode, you'll be hearing from me, Adam Bender. I'm the COO at Lower Street. With a background in discovering talent across the industry, I'll chime in occasionally to offer reflections on what's discussed and connect it all back to podcasting professionally.
Today, we're sitting down to catch up with Norma Jean Belenky. Norma's had an incredibly eclectic professional career, and the same goes for her work in the podcast industry. She spent time in marketing, advertising, and production. But today, we wanted to focus on her most recent role as head of events at Podbean, a podcast hosting and monetization platform. Many of us have probably attended podcasting events before, but it's not often that we actually get to peek behind the curtain and see how they come together. There's so much to explore about what it takes to make these events happen. So let's get into it.
How did you find yourself in podcasting, Norma? What's your story?
Oh, how did I get into podcasting? So I have a media background and I had a podcast years ago. I had confirmed my employment the day I was just going to hop on a plane to help run a yoga and world music festival in Bali.
Wow.
And I was like, I'll be back in 3 weeks.
Wow.
6 weeks out, start date is great. That's fabulous. Can't wait to start on the team because I have a background in events of all kinds and media. So yeah, I'm just one of those people, I think. And that was March of 2020. And I got to Indonesia, to Bali, and the borders closed. So that was not expected.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah. And so, the borders were closed. And basically Podbean was like, we've gone fully remote and we think you're a good fit. So, join the team. And so I was brought on as an account executive for enterprise in the pandemic. So I was working remotely from Indonesia, which was a 12-hour time difference. And I have a really extensive background in events, and I just love connecting with people and hearing their stories. And I love that collaborative feeling of events and how people get to feel part of a community and grow and just, really engaged with a specific brand, all that kind of stuff. So in the pandemic, a couple of months in, I was like, hey, why don't we do an event? So we did. And Podbean is a really growth-oriented company. And so they were like, yeah, that sounds great. And so we launched Podcast Wellness Week, which was really ambitious, to be honest. We did it through Podbean Live, which is the live stream on the Podbean app. And so we ran this entire festival that I singularly produced over a week. And that was phenomenal. We had 5 panels a day full of wellness podcasters, influencers, everything from sleep podcasts to meditation to money mindset, literally everything. There were 25 panels. It was nuts. 4 or 5 podcasters on each panel, just really phenomenal. And so that was kind of how our event vertical was born.
5 panels a day for a week. You must have been knackered. How did you sleep that week?
Yeah, I'm kind of an ambitious person. I got a little twitchy. But that's okay. I think it was one of those things where it was just phenomenal. I mean, the amount and just the incredible guests that we've had and the incredible podcasters that we've gotten to connect with is phenomenal. And, podcasting as an industry is so collaborative. When you reach out to people, they're excited to talk to you. You don't get a lot of no's or a lot of, sorry, we're not interested, or, there's just not a lot of ego. I think because podcasting is a medium that's about connection, people are excited to connect.
I'd love to ask you a little bit more about that outreach side of things, because it's massive for a lot of podcasts, right? Where they're looking for guests, might be looking to expand their network. How do you go about reaching out, Norma? What's your kind of process for that? How do you square that research piece?
It's about doing your research, number one. It's about connecting even when you don't need anything and how you can offer value to people when you meet them. Instead of asking them for something, you can offer, hey, how can I support you? I think that's a really big one. And I think in terms of booking guests, it's something where go hard on your niche. Specifically for Podcasting Smarter, which is our weekly podcast. I mean, it's everything industry related, right? So it's, hey, for the average podcaster who's listening to our show, what value can we provide, right? And that can be across the board. Hey, what new features can we explain to them about the platform that they're already part of? Hey, what guest can we feature that's going to offer value on how to increase subscriptions on your email newsletter, how to increase advertising revenue, how to smooth out the production of your show, right? So it's about providing value, I think, at all times. And then I think in terms of booking guests, I think it's also, you have to really nerd out on your topic. I think that that's really important as well. And then also don't be afraid for a no, right? Don't be oh, that person's too big for me. How do you know? Unless you get a no. I think it's all about the radical ask. I think that's really important as well. And then specifically in terms of reaching out, it's really, really important to offer value, be clear on what you're asking, what the time commitment is, right? Say, this is an interview, it's an hour commitment of your time over the computer, right? Remotely. That kind of thing is really important. Also your reach, just to say hey, here's our reach and here's how we're going to promote it, how we're going to promote you, I think is also really important as well.
I'm thinking about, on the note of booking guests, what's it like to book guests for events specifically? Because just because you're in podcasting, obviously, that doesn't mean you always have public speaking experience or are just comfortable having that in-person presence. So do you have any challenges with booking guests for events specifically?
Well, most of our events are virtual. So it's kind of, tangential to podcasting. So I think that that's a really big factor in our success. But also, podcasting people like to talk. We like to present. We like to be seen. We like to be in the spotlight. And so I think that there is an element of that as well at play. But then it's also a lot of guest research and guest relations, right? Which I guess is a hotel term, but it's about making people feel comfortable. I've had guests say hey, what are the questions in advance? You want to make sure if you need a prep call, if you need two, you can absolutely do that. If they want the questions, you can send them through. Personally, in my opinion, I don't like to send specific questions because then I get really cookie cutter answers. And so I'll send talking points. I'll say, hey, here's the things we're going to cover. It's not a gotcha interview. It's about the industry or it's about the specific topic. But here's the talking points we're going to go over. And I try not to send the questions as they're specifically formulated because I don't want to get somebody's cookie cutter answer that they've rehearsed to the specific questions because that can feel a little bit stale or stiff.
Totally.
Again, Norma, just a question on the event side of things. How much of a crossover is there between podcasting and events in terms of skills, in terms of communications, how you talk to people, how you provide value to the audience? How do the two cross over? And the reason I ask is because a lot of podcasts are looking at the concept of live events and they get it wrong sometimes. Yeah. So I'd love to know, for you as someone who is in both worlds and across both worlds, how do you square that circle?
So I think, number one, it's that the actual meat of the event is very similar, right? You're talking to somebody, they're presenting something, it's a keynote, you're having a conversation, it's an interview, whatever it is. That part of it is very similar. Yeah, maybe there's some difference in the physicality of it, if it's an in-person event or the fact that people are on video and the additional vulnerability of being seen. Sure. I'd say the main difference is the marketing of it. When you have a podcast, people can join whenever they want, pretty much however they want, right? Whichever directory they subscribe to, where you distribute your podcast. Most podcasts have evergreen episodes, so people can go back and listen to them. So it's basically, the content is there, but it's accessible in an evergreen format, right? In terms of live events, I think the difference is, getting people to show up at a specific date and a specific time. And that can be, the marketing of that looks different, I think, for every event, for who your demographic is. I think some, best practices are to make it as easy as possible for people to register. I think also to make it easy as possible for your guests or people that you feature within the event to share it and to share the link to register. I think it's a timing thing.
So can you maybe just walk us through what the process is like? What does it look like when you sit down to start planning an event?
Okay, I'll give you an example. We've done a couple of virtual events on AI tools because we love AI. AI is where we are at, I think, in the collective zeitgeist. And the question is, how practically can the average podcaster use AI to produce and create their podcast? That would be, the question that we're addressing. So number one, you want to present that value proposition when you launch the event. You want to present it within your marketing, within your visuals. You want to make sure everything is really in sync and aligned. You want to make sure that you address those questions. You want to make sure that you connect with people during the live event so that they feel free to ask questions, and you have your team maybe in the comments. If you can't, if you can directly address it in the video, great, or live, great. And if not, be able to have people submit questions to be answered later or answered by a moderator. I think that that's a really important aspect. And then it's all about follow-up, right? I mean, people are joining, especially nowadays, even if it's an in-person event, you're getting an email, right? So you have the opportunity to say, hey, here's the tools we discussed, right? Here's the link to Podbean AI. Here's the link to ChatGPT. Here's the link to Descript's overdub, all that kind of stuff. So I think it is something where you want to make sure that you're providing the value that you promise and that, you're not pushing too much. You're pushing the information. You're not pushing necessarily like a further connection, if that makes sense.
Podcasting and events gel together more than some might think. They're closely linked, but each brings unique challenges. When you're producing a podcast, your audience can engage with your content whenever it suits them. But live events? That's a different story. They require your audience to show up at a specific time and place, which means you've got to approach marketing and engagement from a whole new angle. Like Norma pointed out, it's all about finding fresh ways to provide value and creating an event that feels too good to miss. Sure, you can always host the event somewhere as on-demand content later, but that creates a whole different dynamic. You've got to think carefully about how you promote that to keep the energy and engagement alive even after the event. So if you ever find yourself dipping your toes into the event space, it's important to think about how these dynamics shift. The skills you've picked up in podcasting, knowing your audience and delivering value, they're still crucial, but they'll need a bit of tweaking to ensure people show up and engage in real time. It's a different kind of connection, but one that can be just as rewarding.
I'd love to hear your thoughts, Norma, on AI in podcasting and where you think the value in it lies. And are Podbeans the same?
I think so. So we have Podbean AI at Podbean. First, I'll speak about that. So, we love AI. I think it's cool that we're living in the future. I think everybody feels that way. And the Podbean AI that's built into the platform on the back end. So if you host your podcast with Podbean, you literally can try it for free if you're on a paid plan. And then after that, it's really nominal. It's like $6 a month when you pay annually. And that's for like 3 hours of content. So it works. It's really reasonable in terms of how much you're paying for what you get. And what it provides is that it optimizes your audio, it reduces background noise, it cuts pauses, it equalizes the sound. It really does some incredible things. So that's number one on the sound. It writes your title, or it gives an optimized title that you can edit if you want. It writes the show notes for your episode. And then it also creates a transcript and chapter markers. So chapter markers, I think, are really important. And I can talk about transcripts all day, every day, but I don't think that's what this episode is about today. It's like there's so many little nuances in podcasting where you can just nerd out. But I think it's something that's important because there's such a high risk of burning out in podcasting if you're an independent creator, right? You're a one-man band and your hands or your feet may get tired of drumming, And so it's something where hey, there's AI to help you write the show notes. And of course you can edit it or modify it, but it takes a lot of the weight and the pressure off of creating consistent content. And I think, as we all know, consistency is a really big key in terms of podcasting success. So it's a really incredible time. It's a really exciting time. The tools coming out are phenomenal. And just, for all of the independent creators out there, it's so helpful for so little money and so little time. It saves you so much time. So it's really exciting. And I think my personal thoughts, I guess now we're veering into my personal thoughts. I think we always thought that like AI would be like robot cars, Where are the robot cars? It's podcast show notes. So I think that it's fun to see, how the world evolves and changes as time goes by in ways that we wouldn't necessarily expect. So, from my end, I think it's a really exciting time. We're a very forward company in terms of features and coming out with new features. So, AI for us is super, super exciting. And it's just really great to see how our podcaster community is utilizing these tools and lightening their load. Absolutely.
You talked a little bit before about your origins in podcasting and how you got to creating events whilst you were stuck at the Balinese border in 2020. I'd love to know, obviously, these kind of events live events are really hard to put on. Challenges pop up, like being stuck at a border. What are some of the worst things you've ever seen at a live event? And what can we all learn from them?
Yeah, I think bad internet may be the worst. I think if you have any guests that are inappropriate or go on tangents or take up the room, I think that kind of kills the vibe. And it, ruins the intention of why everyone's there. So I think that that's part of pre-production. You want to just make sure, that you set the standard of, hey, this is professional, or hey, here's our code of conduct, or whatever you need to say. I think those are probably really important things. If you have internet bandwidth issues, there are a lot of ways that you can pre-record events and then schedule them out to be live. So that's something that we've explored as well, because, when you have a great guest, if the internet cuts out or there's technical issues, everybody you've asked to join at a certain time is sitting there. How long are they going to sit there for? That's something that happens as well. So I think that those are kind of the biggest ones. I think also I've created a term of what I deem myself, and that is I am a natural interrupter. So at any point, if something is dragging too long, if something goes in a direction that I don't want, whether it's topic-wise, whether it's the way that people are interacting, I'll just jump in and I'll redirect. And I think that, when you're moderating or when you're leading or you're producing any kind of podcast or event, feel free to steer your own ship. Feel free to direct the kind of experience and the kind of content you want to happen.
I was doing a live podcast once myself, and it was on stage, and it was in this warehouse in London. And they double booked with the room upstairs, and suddenly halfway through the live recording, this massive sound system kicked off.
Oh my God.
And it wasn't just a sound system, there was actually a fashion show that they were putting on upstairs. There were just a rows of people clomping about in really stompy boots through thin wooden floors. And it was an absolute nightmare. And I hate not editing podcasts, but we had to put it out unedited because there was no way that you could splice anything together. The noise was just unbearable. And we had to put something out we were contractually obliged to. So we were just like, okay, we've just got to tell the story.
Yeah.
Okay, they've double booked the space and now we're sharing our space with a rave and a fashion show. So this is why we're not editing. And this is why there's now thumping EDM music in the background.
Yeah, no, but first of all, I think that that's the way to do it. Look, we're all human, right? And as much as we want to be as professional as possible, life happens. And so I think, addressing the elephant in the room is the first thing to do, and just say, hey, we just want to let you know, here's what's going on. And, London is a big city and many things happen, and we got double booked, and, life happens. And so I think number one, that it's really important to address whatever's going on. I had a guest for Podcast Wellness Week, my very first large virtual event, and his power went out.
Oh no.
He was speaking on a panel. It was really bad. It was he tried to, I think there was something wrong with the data on the phones as well. So he tried to get in his car while live. You could hear the ding, ding, ding of the car. And you could hear trying to drive down the road to stay connected to the internet. And so, I think things like that happen. And some of our events, if somebody does have internet or there is an issue, we will pre-record. We'll solicit questions from our community. We'll pre-record and then we'll broadcast like we're live. We'll make sure that the guest and somebody from Podbean is there to moderate in the comments and answer any questions. I think there are ways to ensure success. But it is something where things happen when you're live. And that's also what makes it great. So I think that you have to just fully embrace it, right? You have to embrace the amazing, what happens live moment and the suck of it, right? Of, hey, there's a fashion show. Or, hey, the power went out and this guy's trying to get in his car and remain on this panel talking about mental health. Things happen. And so it's something where people join live events for that, right? For that energy, for that synchronicity. And sometimes it can be unexpected. And that's part of what makes events events.
Norma makes a great point about the nature of live events. We're so used to the polished, seamless nature of pre-recorded content where every little mistake can be edited out. But there's actually a kind of magic in the unpredictable. Live events bring a chaotic but choreographed energy that you just can't replicate in a studio. In podcasting, we constantly handle hiccups behind the scenes, safely tucked away in our editing software. But in a live setting, you've got to be ready for anything, whether it's a technical glitch, an unexpected guest comment, or something as simple as bad internet. And honestly, that's part of the excitement. There's something authentic and real about letting your podcast breathe in that live environment. And after all, podcasting is a field that thrives on authenticity. So maybe instead of trying to control every aspect of your show, it's worth letting some of that unpredictability in. It's what keeps things lively and engaging, and it could be exactly what sets your podcast apart. Embracing that live energy might just be the key to taking your podcast to the next level.
What's the inverse of that? Is there like a moment that sticks out that's really memorable from a really successful live event for you?
Gosh, I mean, for us, we produce a lot of events. So virtually, I produce 2 to 3 events per month. And that's something where, like, I'm just trying to think. I've been doing that for a couple of years now.
That's a lot.
I really love bringing community together. So, I mean, it's really about creating community. And so I love when I can speak to a podcaster on a niche topic and just like really nerd out. And I think it's something where I'm always a really curious person. So I always want to know how things get made and what people's process is and how they harness and foster their creativity. Podcasting is such a creative medium. It's just like I get to talk to people and like go deep on whatever they're interested in, and we get to like nerd out together. I love the events where I get to put panels together and create community. I love events that we get to do for Pride, for Black History Month, connecting podcasters and talking about, what their experience is that may not be within the common zeitgeist, right? Like I had a guest, Bethany Hawkins from Crackers and Soup, and she was talking about how like AI is great and all, but there is an implicit bias sometimes for people of color. So I think that that's also a really important conversation to have. So I think, it's just about making things accessible, that education piece, that excitement piece, and helping people get to where they want to go.
It's fabulous, isn't it? It's one of the great things about podcasting in general, but I guess for your job specifically, Norma, you said that you do podcasts for a whole different loads of fields. So podcasting is great because you get to build a community and be part of a little network within your niche. But actually now you get to nerd out with a whole load of other niches and celebrate them. That must be really rewarding.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think it's one of those things where like, as an industry, it's a bit odd, right? It's a small club of us that most podcasters are self-funded. They're independent creators. And so it is somewhat of a small club of, what's your day job? Podcasting. Right? And so it's something where, I think that is a real benefit. And it's a real privilege to be able to connect with so many podcasters and aspects of the industry and have that overview in an industry where there's so many independent creators as well.
So Norma, we know that you originally started in sales. So can you just talk about how you made the transition to events and how someone in the industry or someone interested in the industry might find their way into event planning?
I mean, in my specific journey, I also had this background and I love events. So I was able to kind of create that vertical and launch it, and then it became successful. So I think in terms of a specific podcast, it's a great way to engage with your audience. It's a great way to monetize in terms of selling tickets. It's a great way to, solicit more sponsorship. I think that there's a lot of ways that events can add value to a specific podcast. For independent podcast service providers, sure. I mean, you could approach popular podcasts that you like and love and that are within your niche and wheelhouse. And you could say, hey, I want to produce an event for you, and here's how that would look. But yeah, I would say that in terms of events within the podcasting industry, that would be kind of my grasp of it.
So Norma, looking at events as part of the industry, what role do you think that they are going to play as podcasting grows, as podcasting professionalizes? Where do you think things are going, and what role do you think events are going to play in the industry?
Okay, so there's several kinds of events, right? I'd say the first is large podcasting conferences, right? You've got the podcast show in London, you've got Podcast Movement, you've got Radio Days, which does phenomenal work, North America, Europe, Asia. They have 3 different conferences. So in-person conferences are really big, number one, and that's to kind of learn what's going on, get an overview of the industry. That's really important. Connect with other podcasters, find out about emerging technology, find out about service providers, all of that. So in-person, large scale conferences are an important aspect, right? And I think that that's something that there's just this amazing energy when you get like 3,000 podcasters together, because number one, we all want to talk, right? So it's a bunch of people that want to talk. So I think that that's a really fun, there's a fun energy there. Number one, and there's just a lot of networking and a lot of connections. So that's on the large conference scale. Then, in terms of, the events that I produce a lot of the time are educational, right? How can I educate our podcasting population about new features, about best practices, about strategy for how to create a successful podcast, whether that's production, whether that's monetization, whether that's video, whether that's AI tools, right? Whatever that is. So I think on the educational side, from podcast hosting and monetization providers, from editing software, anything like that, there is a large educational component because you're dealing with independent creatives, right? Who may not necessarily have that education yet of, hey, here's how you upload your podcast. Hey, here's how a podcast is distributed via RSS feed. Here's what a podcast directory is. So I think, on that end, there is a lot of education that is important. And I think it's really important to empower the population that you serve. That's the second. The third, I would say, is that as specific podcasts build an audience, it's about engaging with that audience in person, right? It's doing live recordings, it's having meet and greets, it's, all sorts of stuff like that. Maybe it's a party for people who donated to your patron program, anything like that. I think it's part of that relational aspect of building your specific audience and your podcast brand.
So lastly, maybe just to wrap us up, Norma, what's your vision for the future of podcasting events? Do you have any predictions? Do you have any ideas about how something like technology might change the landscape?
I think there's a couple of things there, right? I think the industry as a whole is still evolving. It's still a very new medium. If you're within the podcast industry, it may not feel that way every single moment of every single day, but we are in a big growth moment. We're in a big growth moment in terms of creativity, in terms of monetization, in terms of the tech and the tools that we're able to use. So that's a really exciting thing. On the event side, I think that people do want to connect in person. And I think that that is important. Podbean, we have a booth, right, at most major podcast conferences because people still want to come up and talk to a human, right? And just connect personally. So there is that aspect, I think, in terms of in-person events that's really important. I think that, where things are in terms of the future, for us, it's really about educating our population and empowering them to be successful in their podcasts. And I see that growing more and more. I think that podcasting is something where as it continues to grow, the need to offer value, to connect with the population that you serve, whether that's the audience of your podcast. For us at Podbean, that's our creator community and our enterprise community. But yeah, I think it's about that connection and value.
Love it.
So I guess, Norma, one last question. If you could go back to your younger self, just starting out in media or events or podcasting, what would your advice be, your last piece of career advice to slightly younger Norma?
Yeah. In general, the only regret I have in my life is not buying Bitcoin in 2012. That is it.
Don't we all?
Out of everything I've ever done in my whole life, being that's not real money, in 2012, I probably should have just bought a couple Bitcoin. If I had to give myself career advice, it's work hard and good things will happen. And, don't have any expectations. I think it's always important to be mission driven and to know that you've done your best and to really perform to that standard, but to know that the next thing will always happen right when it's supposed to, and you can't predict it. I think I'm somebody who always wants to know what's going to happen. And I don't think we ever really know that. We're human and you never know what's going to happen and when and how and with whom. And I think it's just important to enjoy the ride.
That's good to hear.
And buy some Bitcoin.
Yeah. Buy some Bitcoin.
The cold open. That's the cold open.
As we've heard from Norma, the podcasting industry is in an exciting phase of evolution, and events are becoming a central part of that growth. They're not just an extra layer, they're the driving force behind the main thing that podcasting thrives on, audience engagement. Whether it's through virtual summits, live recordings, or in-person conferences, events are where podcasters and listeners forge even deeper connections. Audience connection is the lifeblood of our industry, and as events continue to grow and evolve, so does podcasting itself. The more effectively we engage audiences through innovative and well-executed events, the stronger and more dynamic the podcasting world becomes. Basically, the two go hand in hand. When creators and companies invest in the event space, they're investing in the broader expansion and influence of the entire industry. So if you're passionate about podcasting, it's a really exciting and opportunistic time to dive into the event space. If you're interested and want to feel it out, start by attending events and learning the ropes. And as you gain experience, consider organizing your own. The future of podcasting is bright, and events are at the heart of that journey, driving audience connection and industry growth. Thanks for tuning into this episode. A big thank you to our panel, Norma Jean Belenky, Daria Lawson, and Sam Datapalan. I'm Adam Bender, and if you'd like to join us on People in Podcasting, just email sam@lowerstreet.co. That's just co. Let us know if you want to be a part of the show, or if you want to stay updated on the industry without stepping up to the mic, subscribe on your favorite app so you don't miss out. People in Podcasting is a Lower Street production. We're creating this to serve the industry and celebrate the people who make it what it is. We specialize in making podcasts for brands. If you want to learn more about us or our services, get in touch, and we'll see you next time.